The morning air smelled faintly of soap. Polish and paint. New beginnings had their own fragrance. Grace thought. She stood in front of the shop, with her hands clasped tight around the keys Vincent had placed in her palm. The sign above the doorway gleamed in crisp lettering. Crystal Clean Services. The name had been hers, but everything else, the polished counters, the uniforms folded neatly on shelves, the sturdy brushes and polished copper pails, had come from Vincent's planning and quiet persistence. Grace pressed her lips together, fighting back a tide of emotions. She was grateful, yes, but also afraid. Owning a shop was nothing like taking odd jobs or sweeping for coins. This was hers, her responsibility, her risk. Vincent's voice broke the silence. "It suits you." She turned. He was leaning casually against the doorframe, his coat unbuttoned, hair falling a little untidy over his brow. Yet his eyes held that steady, grounding strength she had come to depend on. Grace laughed softly, though her voice trembled. "A cleaning shop? Most people dream of jewels or silk. And here I am, soap and rags." "Soap and rags," Vincent said, stepping closer, "are the foundation of every empire. You'd be surprised how much power lies in being the one who keeps the world shining." He said it as if he believed it. Grace swallowed hard, then nodded and pushed open the door. The shop's interior was small but orderly. Wooden shelves lined one wall, stacked with folded linens, neatly labeled bottles, and jars of fragrant oils. In the corner stood a counter polished to a mirror shine, and behind it hung a simple chalkboard menu. Laundry, pressing, polishing, housekeeping services. Grace had insisted on adding one more line at the bottom, written in careful, elegant hand, because every home deserves to shine. Her eyes lingered on that line. It wasn't just business, it was a promise. Vincent placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You've built something good, Grace, and this time, it's yours." Her chest tightened. For years she had been little more than a helper, an unseen hand cleaning up other people's messes. Her work unthanked, her name forgotten. But now she had a place where her labor bore her name. The first customers arrived hesitantly. A woman with 2 children clutching her skirts brought in a stack of laundry, murmuring apologies about the stains. Grace welcomed her with a warm smile and gentle words, reassuring her that everything would come out fresh. The woman left lighter, her children chattering about the scent of the oils. Later, a baker came by, flour dusted on his sleeves, asking if she might scrub his counters weekly. Grace agreed, already imagining how the scent of lemon oil might brighten his shop. By the end of the first day, Grace had served 7 customers. Modest, but real. She counted each coin herself, feeling their weight as if it were proof she was finally standing on her own 2 feet. Vincent said little, keeping to the background, balancing ledgers and speaking firmly to suppliers who tried to raise prices when they saw Grace alone. She knew he was doing more than he let on, but she let him because she was learning that partnership didn't mean weakness, it meant trust. The following week, the rhythm of the shop took shape. Grace rose early, swept the floors, polished the counters until they gleamed, and laid out the uniforms. Customers began returning. One woman told another, who told another. Soon Grace had a small but steady trickle of loyal clients. But with growth came whispers. Across the street stood an older, established laundry service. Its owner, a broad-shouldered man with heavy brows named Kellen, had ruled the neighborhood trade for years. He stood in his doorway often, arms crossed, watching Grace's shop with a scowl that deepened each day. One evening, as Grace locked the shop, she caught his voice carried by the wind. "Won't last a month. Little girls don't know how to scrub the dirt life throws at you." Grace pretended not to hear, but her heart squeezed painfully. That night she told Vincent. He listened silently, then placed the ledger aside. "Grace," he said, "you're not here to please them. You're here to prove them wrong. And the best way to do that isn't with words, it's with work." Grace nodded, though doubt still gnawed at her. She went to bed early, praying that work and faith would be enough. But the world rarely let dreams stand untouched. The first act of sabotage was subtle. A shipment of cleaning oils arrived with half the bottles cracked, their contents wasted into the straw. Grace's suppliers swore the goods left whole. The second was crueler. A set of velvet laundry bags she'd ordered were found slashed open, as if by a knife, useless and torn. And on the morning of her first large contract merchant's townhouse, Grace found a folded slip of paper slipped under the door. Her fingers shook as she unfolded it. "Close your doors, Grace. Clean all you like, but some stains never wash away." She stared at the words until they blurred. Fear prickled down her spine. For a moment she thought of turning the key, locking the door, and hiding away. But when Vincent arrived, she shoved the note at him. He read it once, his jaw tightening. Then he tore it in half and dropped it in the waste bin. "They want you scared," he said simply, "so don't give them what they want." Grace drew a trembling breath, then straightened her shoulders. "Then we'll keep it shining." And though she said it with more courage than she felt, she realized something as she looked at Vincent's steady gaze. Maybe courage wasn't the absence of fear, maybe it was deciding to work anyway. Hands steady, heart beating, even when shadows gathered outside. The morning bell above the shop door jingled, announcing Grace's second week of business. She looked up from the counter to find a familiar face, Mrs. Alara, a widow who lived 2 streets down. Her arms were full of linens, bundled neatly but worn thin. "Morning, Grace," Alara said, smiling with the weary gentleness of someone who carried too many burdens alone. "Thought I'd give your shop a try. My old cleaner never quite managed to get rid of the ash smell." Grace accepted the bundle with a bow of her head. "Leave it to me, Mrs. Alara. When I'm done, it will smell of lavender instead of fire." The woman chuckled softly, relief flickering across her features. That moment, the exchange of trust, however small, ignited something in Grace's chest. Each customer wasn't just income. They were a chance to restore dignity, to ease lives in quiet ways. Vincent noticed, too. He leaned in the corner with his ledger, watching Grace speak to customers with an attentiveness no coin could buy. Later, when the shop quieted, he remarked, "You don't just clean for them, you give them back something they've lost." Grace blinked. "I'm just washing and pressing." Word of Grace's touch spread. The baker who had first hired her returned with a contract for regular service. Then the owner of a small inn brought sheets and curtains. Muttering something about guests complaining of dusty smells, Grace and her small team of helpers to local girls she had offered work to took on the job with care. The girls, Myra and Sal, were grateful. Myra was quick with her hands, Sal quick with her laughter. They scrubbed and polished under Grace's patient instruction, and soon the shop bustled with the energy of women who took pride in their work. "Why hire them?" Vincent asked, one evening as they tallied the day's coins. "You could manage alone." Grace looked at the 2 girls, now folding uniforms at the back. "Because I was them once," she said softly, "scrubbing floors for pennies, invisible. If I can give them a place where they're seen, why wouldn't I?" Vincent studied her for a long moment, then gave a rare, approving nod. But across the street, Kellen's scowl deepened. His old laundry business was losing customers slowly, but enough to notice. He had built his reputation on brute force and long-standing deals, not on warmth or care. Grace's charm, her meticulous work, her insistence on fresh scents that lingered in cleaned homes, these things gnawed at his dominance. Rumors began to circulate. Whispers that Grace used strange oils not fit for homes, that her shop wasn't properly licensed, that she only thrived because a man Vincent was bankrolling her. One afternoon, as Grace was polishing the front counter, 2 women entered. They looked around the shop, whispering to each other with pinched expressions. Finally one spoke, her voice carrying the sharpness of gossip made public. "They say you use tricks," she said bluntly, "that your oils damage fabric." Grace's heart thudded. "Please," she said calmly, "let me show you." Here she reached for a folded cloth, dabbed a drop of lavender oil, and pressed it under warm water. The fabric emerged, bright, fragrant, undamaged. She offered it to them. The women sniffed, exchanged glances, and finally one murmured, "It does smell nice." They left without further accusation. Vincent appeared from the back, arms crossed. "You handled that well," Grace exhaled, only then realizing her hands were trembling. "But for how long can I fight whispers?" Vincent's expression hardened. "As long as it takes. The louder they whisper, the more afraid they are. Grace refused to be cowed. She introduced new touches, sachets of dried herbs tucked into finished laundry, free polishing for first-time customers, and handwritten thank you notes tied with string. These small gestures made her shop not just a service, but an experience. Customers returned not just for the clean clothes, but for the way Grace made them feel valued. Mira, ever curious, asked one day, "Why do you spend so much time on these extras? Isn't the cleaning enough?" Grace smiled, handing her another lavender sachet. "Because anyone can scrub a stain. But making someone feel cared for, that's what they'll never forget." Sal clapped her hands. "Then no one will forget us." Grace laughed, though in the corner of her vision, she noticed Kellen standing outside his own shop, arms folded, his glare fixed on hers. The sabotage escalated. A crate of soap was stolen before it reached her shop. One night, someone hurled mud across her freshly polished windows. Another morning, Mira arrived to find a dead rat left on the doorstep. Grace felt her resolve wavering, but Vincent never wavered. When he found her scrubbing the mud-stained glass in silence, he placed his hand gently over hers. "Grace," he said, his voice steady, "a diamond is just coal that refused to break under pressure. Remember that." She met his eyes, and in them she saw not only defiance, but belief in her. And in that moment, her fear burned away, replaced with a fierce determination. "We'll keep it shining," she whispered. But as the shop's lanterns glowed warm against the night, Grace caught sight of something that chilled her blood. A cloaked figure stood in the alley across the street, half hidden by shadow. He wasn't watching the shop idly, he was waiting. His hand brushed the wall beside him, leaving a streak of black dust against the stone. Grace's breath caught. She didn't know what it meant, but instinct told her it was no accident. When she turned to call Vincent, the figure was gone. Only the smear of dust remained, dark and ominous in the lamplight. And that brings us to the halfway mark of Chapter 4 in Dust and Diamonds. Grace's new cleaning shop is starting to shine, but shadows are already creeping closer. What will happen when rival business owners and hidden enemies push back harder? Make sure you subscribe to our channel HahaBots for more stories like this. Don't miss the continuation, where we'll uncover the rest of Chapter 4 and see just how strong Grace and Vincent can stand. Stay tuned, the second half of Chapter 4 is coming soon.